Welcome to the Team Us podcast. We're Ted and Ashley Slater.
As couples, we all want to win in marriage, right? And we don't mean in a who's right or who's wrong sort of way, but together as a united team.
Oneness in marriage isn't always easy, though. Sometimes it's really hard. It can be a struggle to stay connected and face the difficulties of everyday life together.
If we're not intentional, it's easy for the us, the you and me, to quickly become you versus me.
Well, this podcast is all about marriage as a team and how to live the everyday moments of your marriage together. We'll share honestly and humorously with you about the betters and the worsts of our marriage. You'll hear how grace, commitment, cooperation, and lots of laughter have helped us stay united.
Plus, in every episode, you'll also get some practical tips and tools to apply to your marriage.
We want to see your Team Us win. We're cheering you on, so let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Team Us podcast.
Can you believe it's the last episode
No,
of the season?
It has gone so fast.
The season finale.
Yes.
And we're going to finish well?
We are. We're going to finish well by talking about finishing well. We're going to talk about why right now matters to the long term of our marriages, how the choices we make today affect our relationship tomorrow, next year, and even 5 years from now, a decade from now. So Ted, remember how we shared, the story of our first kind of date in the first episode?
I do. It's awkward and uncomfortable and fun in retrospect.
Right. You mentioned the M word, marriage.
Marriage.
Well, do you remember the story about my maternal grandparents back when they were in college?
I do. Right. You'll have to remind me, though.
Okay. Well, before my grandparents went to be with the Lord, one of my sisters spent some time collecting stories from them. And she recorded her conversations with them. And as I was writing Team Us, I remember hearing a story that I'd never heard before. I think my grandma was the one who told this story. It was back in 1952, and they were both students at a Bible college. And I guess they kind of casually knew each other. But one particular day in the lunchroom, my grandpa decided to sit down across from my grandma, and he said, "How would you like to spend the rest of your life eating breakfast across the table from me?" Yeah.
Do you think that really happened?
Yes. Oh, yeah. My grandma wouldn't make that up.
That is wild.
Well, I mean, you said by...
Well, yes. I said some weird things, too.
Right. So, I mean, 1952, they probably said weird things back then, too.
Guess.
But I guess my grandma just kind of giggled and thought, oh, what a big flirt. But they were married like a year later. Within a year later. I don't remember the exact
Starts with a flirt,
time.
Ends with a ring.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Wing.
And like all marriages, their marriage wasn't perfect. They had lots of ups and downs. But they ended up being married 52 years. My grandpa died, and so that's why it was only 52 years. But I think we actually our first year of marriage, we actually flew to Ohio to celebrate their 50th wedding anniversary.
I did. I remember that. That was nice.
Yeah. So, I mean, we all want to finish well, right? None of us are going to have perfect marriages, but we can do our best to walk them out in a way that honors each other and honors the Lord and leaves a legacy.
A legacy. I was thinking that word,
Right.
legacy.
Because, I mean, I look back and I go, wow, they were married 52 years.
Right. I mean, a legacy could be a ton of money or a name on a building or something, or it could be a marriage walked out with integrity and finished well.
Right. And it's the daily decisions we make, both individually and together, that really influence how our marriage fares in the long run. And so we have to be very purposeful to live out the day-to-day in a way that positively affects the years to come and that encourages us to keep moving towards that finish line united as a team.
Right. I can't help but think of the term trajectory.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
we want to make sure our marriage trajectory, I don't know, that word is so hard for me to say. You have problems with some words. I have a problem with the word trajectory. But, making sure that our marriage is on a God-word, together-word trajectory. And if it's not, maybe tweak things along the way,
Right.
fine-tune maybe use the sweeping analogy,
Exactly.
right?
It goes back to curling and that idea of the stone moving towards the house or the center and the sweepers
That
on
was
the
episode
side.
1, right?
I think it was episode 2.
Okay.
Yeah, episode 2. Yeah, it's that idea of continuing on that path and making course corrections
Right.
as needed.
Not being complacent.
Right.
That's good.
Yeah. Well, I thought that we'd talk about 2 of the ways that have been helpful to us over the years in just keeping this idea in mind that what we're doing now affects us in the future, affects our legacy. And so the first one is we make today's decisions with a long-term perspective. And
So, like, what's for dinner? That would not be an example. That's
no.
not a good
well,
example.
no, okay. So I'm thinking about, over the course of our marriage, you've brought up Billy Graham before and what our culture calls the Billy Graham rule.
Right. It's a little abrasive to some people and a little bit, maybe overly cautious. Yeah. But it seems to have worked for him.
Right. Well, you want to explain what that is?
The Billy Graham rule, as I understand it, is not being alone with somebody of the opposite sex as much as possible, if at all possible. So if you're counseling, or I remember the story of him getting in an elevator, and a woman got in the elevator, and I think he either got off or he had one of his assistants come in the elevator with him. Just it really sounds, what's the word, dogmatic? It sounds legalistic, but
I think it's this idea
offensive.
of like just not even the appearance.
The appearance, right?
Of anything.
Like not going out for a private lunch with a female coworker. I wouldn't do that. Or going to her house and helping her, move some furniture or something like that. Just
right.
a personal entanglement with somebody of the opposite sex that could lead somewhere. I don't want to flatter myself, but that's a Billy Graham rule.
Yeah, and I think it ties back to something we did not talk about in our last episode about friends that we confide in. That is actually in the book, which
Good
is
point.
that not having, like you, Ted, do not have close female friends that you go confide in. And I don't have close male friends that I go confide in. We make sure that those friends that we are confiding in and being emotionally vulnerable with are, I have female friends, you have male friends. And I think it's that same idea of just realizing that the decisions today affect tomorrow. So if,
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, there's nothing necessarily innately wrong with speaking with somebody of the opposite sex.
Oh, no. Or being friends with
or
them.
Or even providing counsel or whatever. I mean, I've got friends that are female,
Right.
I would say names, but I won't say names.
No. It's this idea.
Let me be extreme here.
Yeah.
Every affair started with a friendship, okay? It didn't just go from, to an affair. It started with a hello and a can I help you, and vulnerability and opening your heart and spending time.
So it's friendship with boundaries.
Right.
It's just being cautious. And I think that's what we see in the Billy Graham rule. But I think that the principle that I'm pulling from that is that I think he understood that the decisions he made today
Right.
affected the long term.
And that's just one example. There are other examples.
Right. I mean, another example is we talked about a few episodes ago, about job loss. And remember when you had moved to Chicago,
right?
Because you got a job.
We were living in Colorado Springs. I had lost my job there. I got a job outside of Chicago. We were trying to sell our house in Colorado Springs in a tough housing market.
It was like a recession, I think.
So I moved out to start doing the job. I was staying with my uncle and working. And after, was it a couple of months?
I think it was about
3 months?
2 or 3 months, and we thought this is just financially, it makes sense. Financially, this is the
Financially,
best
right.
decision for us.
It's low cost for me in Chicago.
Right. But for our marriage and our family, we knew it was better for us to all be together under the same roof in the same state. And so we chose the decision that was a little financially harder for
It
us,
was
but was
thousands of dollars per month more costly to do it that way.
right.
It's a big expense, big decision.
But we were thinking long term as far as our relationship.
And we figured that if we made the decision to honor our relationship, that is to sacrifice our finances for our relationship, that's a good thing, and
Right.
that God would honor us.
Yes.
He'd provide for us through the season.
Yeah. And it was already a very hard, stressful season. So I think it was much better that we were walking through that together, because I think we could have grown apart in some ways had we stayed.
Right. I mean,
Separated.
I was apart from you for months.
Yeah, you'd come back every other weekend.
I think so.
maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's another example of us making a right now decision, knowing, with a long-term perspective. So, okay, well, there are lots of other examples that we could talk about, because I think this is a daily thing. I mean, if you look back at other episodes, just those moments
sure, I can
when,
think of some things.
okay,
Like there was a time early in our marriage where I would stay up late working on a project or something. You'd go to bed early. You'd wake up early then, and I'd wake up late. But we made the decision to go to bed at the same time as much as possible.
because we knew that one night could turn into 2 nights, could
Right.
turn into a pattern that would, I think, affect our closeness and our unity.
So that's a small thing that
Yeah.
affects the trajectory of our marriage.
Or even, focusing on these habits that annoy us. If we keep focusing on that, that's going to cause division and in the relationship and irritation. But when you show grace, you're thinking long term.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Good.
Well, that's the first one. The second one is we have a realistic view of our own weaknesses. Now, I think this one is really important. We've seen marriages end up in crisis because couples have thought that could never happen to us. And so they're not on guard against situations. I mean, this ties back into us talking about having female and male friends that we confide in.
And we literally have friends that have done this.
Yes.
Christian friends.
Yes. That, have thought it can't happen to us. And so they
One
weren't.
decision, 2 decisions, 3 decisions, and then they're just
Right.
really hurting their marriage.
Right. So it's this idea of looking at ourselves and going, we could be tempted. We could make bad decisions. I always think of the Rich Mullins song, we're not as strong as we think we are. This idea of having a realistic view of ourselves as flawed, sinful people who need Jesus, and then being on guard against potential temptation, and being ready to flee. I mean, the New Testament tells us to flee temptation, right?
And didn't Paul confess that he was basically the worst sinner that he knew?
Mm-hmm. And if the Apostle Paul can say it, then why can't we?
Have the same attitude that maybe, I see sin in people around me, but maybe I'm inclined to know lesser degree.
Right. And I think one of the things that we do too is when it comes to our computers and our phones and our social media accounts, we know each other's passwords, so that if we want to log in and look at the other person's, we can. I mean, I don't know if we ever really do that, but we know that we can. There's no hiding what's on our devices from each other.
Right. I mean, a marriage with shame or a marriage with, secrets, that doesn't make for the best marriage.
Right. I mean, occasionally you might buy something and tell me after, but
I don't know what you're talking about. Like a keyword or something?
Yeah. No, I don't know.
Yeah. A new car.
No.
I've never done that.
Yeah, you've never done that. So I think it's really important for us to not overestimate ourselves. and assume that we can't find ourselves in certain situations. Yeah, all right. Well, we're just about finished with this final episode. So let's review. So our goal as couples is to finish well.
Absolutely.
To run this race before us.
With endurance.
Exactly.
Sounds biblical.
It is. And 2 ways that we can work toward doing this is to make today's decision with a long-term perspective and to have a realistic view of ourselves. And I think when we do that, we're going to walk out our marriages in imperfect ways, but hopefully in ways that, as we talked about earlier, honor each other and honor God and leave a legacy that hopefully, not only impacts our kids, but if we have kids, but also impacts those around us and inspires them to want to walk out their marriages well, too.
Right. We want to be the kind of couple that people say, hey, I want to be like them.
Right. Couples that face life's challenges with realism but hope, and are vulnerable.
Authentic.
Yeah. Well, we need a nest time challenge, final nest time challenge.
Let's do a good one.
I think you're going to like this one.
Let's finish on a high point here.
So, Ted loves to, for those of you listening, he loves to spend time in cemeteries.
Oh, I do. It sounds morbid, but it's not morbid. It's sobering.
Right.
There's this Latin phrase, memento mori, consider your death. And it's a good way to remember to live.
Well, that sounds very N.D. Wilson-ish, too. The idea of death by living.
Right.
Right.
We've got an allotted time to walk this story out, so let's make the most of it. So, yes, I do enjoy going to cemetery. Enjoy is a weird word. I do, I do like going to cemeteries. Well,
this week's challenge is to go to a cemetery this week.
During the day, when it's not creepy.
Yeah, this is not supposed, walk through it slowly, read the headstones.
Subtract the birth dates from death dates, figure how old they were.
No, well, maybe, I don't know. But think about your marriage as you do. What would you want those closest to you to say about your marriage after you're gone? And what can you do now to help make that legacy a reality? It's kind of a deep kind of
it is
challenge. You're going to want to do that, aren't you?
Maybe.
There's
some cemeteries near us.
That's true. Yeah. All right. Well, that is...
Is that almost a wrap?
Yeah.
It's almost a wrap.
It's almost a wrap. Well, we hope that this episode and all of the episodes this season were encouraging and helpful to you. And remember that we're cheering your Team Us on.
And that's a wrap.
The Team Us podcast is a production of Life Audio and the Salem Web Network. If you enjoyed Ted and Ashley's conversation today, would you leave the show a rating and review in your favorite podcast app? It really does help more people like you find the show. This podcast was produced by me, Kelly Givens, and Stephen Sanders, with executive oversight by Stephen McGarvey. To find more faith-filled, encouraging podcasts like this one, just head over to lifeaudio.com.